Week number 5, matchups that matter. We're breaking down everything you guys need to know to set your fantasy football lineups. I know it is a rough week for a lot of people out there. We got running backs, wide receivers going down like flies. And of course, there are 4 teams on bye this week. That means no Atlanta Falcons, no Pittsburgh Steelers, no Chicago Bears, and no Green Bay Packers. So a lot of people are going to have to dig a little bit deeper than we normally would want to dig in our fantasy football lineup. So let's get it kicked off. The London game, 9:30 a.m. kickoff on the East Coast here. West Coasters, make sure you have your lineup set early Sunday morning and or Saturday night, because last week Jaylen Warren was a surprise inactive in the Dublin game, and some people probably got screwed by that, or maybe didn't get to use Kenny Gainwell because of that. So make sure you guys get up early / get your lineup set before you go to bed. We do have 6 1 p.m. games, 4 p.m. games, and a regularly scheduled Sunday night and Monday night game. Vikings and Browns is the first game that we have on the docket, the lowest over-under on the slate. Now, because there's only 14 games on the slate, the numbers are out of 14. Like the over-under, the over percentage, and the pace of play are out of 14 this week because we do have 4 teams on bye. And then the DVOA markers are out of 28 because we have 4 teams on bye there. So you can see the 2 worst offensive and defensive DVOA matchups of the entire slate. But it is expected to be fast-paced, but no surprise here, an over-under of just 36 points. Both quarterbacks not in your lineup. Nobody's messing with Gabriel or with Wentz. I can't imagine you're down that bad unless it's a super flex league. Start Quinshon Judkins. He's been an absolute revelation so far this year. He has a top 10 matchup against the Vikings run defense. Jordan Mason, despite losing some work to Xavier Scott out of the backfield last week, he is still a pretty good start this week. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, obviously in your lineup. Jerry Jeudy without Cedric Tillman is definitely interesting. Tillman probably going to be out for the next couple of weeks with a hamstring pull. And then because Tillman is out, I do think both Browns tight ends are in play. Harold Fannin, my preference of the 2 of them. TJ Hawkinson is currently 5th on the Vikings in first read target share behind Jalen Nailor and Adam Thielen, let alone Addison and Jefferson in the game that Addison played. So not a great option so far this year at the tight end position. You thought you were getting an every week starter. He hasn't been that for you. Keep an eye on that going forward. And then Minnesota's defense, Brian Flores could really dial it up against a rookie quarterback, 3rd round pick, 5'11", soaking wet here. So I do think that Minnesota should be in a great spot to be able to take care of business here. And you can definitely play Will Reichert, their kicker, as well. Stat of the game. In games without Cedric Tillman in 2024, Jerry Jeudy posted 21 PPR points per game and 10.8 targets per game. It wasn't just that massive game against the Broncos where he had like 250-something yards. He saw 13 or more targets in 4 of the 6 games last year that Cedric Tillman missed. And Tillman is expected to be out for the next little while here, potentially going on IR with his hamstring injury. So go trade for Jerry Jeudy before this game. Definitely make sure he could be in your lineup this week. I do think he's a very good flex option. And then I'm going to give a deeper name for every single game this week just because there's so many buys, so many injuries. If you need a deeper name, I don't think Isaiah Bond is a terrible option to throw out there. Like I said, no Cedric Tillman, and Isaiah Bond looked pretty decent last week. Moving into the 1 p.m. window, like I said, we got 6 games here. Houston Texans traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. No Lamar Jackson. That has been confirmed in this game, so it will be Cooper Rush starting for the Baltimore Ravens. Texans are 2-point road favorites in this game because of Cooper Rush starting, implied for 21.25 points. This game is not a great game environment. The under catching some steam, just a 40.5 point total, and the pace of play is quite slow. But both offenses have defensive DVOA matchup advantages because the Ravens have been so bad on defense. Obviously, the Baltimore offense not going to be nearly the unit they are with Lamar Jackson, but that's good to know still for Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry and whoever you might be starting. In this game, if you need a streaming quarterback, I think CJ Stroud's a great option because there's, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, those type of guys on bye this week. People are going to need to go to the waiver wire, and CJ Stroud is one of my favorite streamers this week. Derrick Henry, hopefully he can start to do something, but he is a great start this week against the Texans. He's probably going to get fed a lot of carries. Woody Marks, after his breakout game last week, has to be in your lineup against the Ravens run defense that has been terrible, and Woody Marks in this game projects as a guy who can catch a number of passes, knowing that, he's probably going to be in a game environment on the road. They should be able to throw and get him mismatches in space. Nico Collins could go absolutely nuclear against the Baltimore Ravens secondary that is down a number of pieces, as is their defense in general. So Nico Collins, if you got to play against him, I fear for your safety. Zay Flowers, even though Cooper Rush is starting, we saw in those final couple drives against the Chiefs, he was still getting targets. He is also the type of guy that gets manufactured looks, so I think Zay Flowers probably has like a kind of Wan'Dale Robinson-y type game where he has 8, 9, 10 targets in this one, but he probably doesn't go over like 75 yards because the offense is just having trouble moving the football. Mark Andrews, a decent streamer, but keep an eye out for Isaiah Likely because he did come back last week and he did affect Mark Andrews' snaps and his overall route participation. Houston's defense definitely in play against Cooper Rush, and both kickers, I would say, are in play, but definitely Kaimi Fairbairn of the two. Stat of the game here, per James Roy, the Texans are 29th in points scored, so they have not been a good offense. The Ravens' defense, though, is first in points allowed, so this is a get-right spot for C.J. Stroud and the Texans. On the flip side, the Texans' defense is first in lowest points allowed, and the Ravens are without Lamar Jackson, so I actually really like the Texans to cover this 2 points. I like the Texans to put the Ravens flock into a tizzy, starting 1-4 without their star quarterback. I do think that the Texans will win this game. A deeper name to look out for is Christian Kirk. I think he's definitely playable in this one, and honestly, any of the Texans' ancillary pieces are half-decent shouts at this point. Carolina Panthers taking on the Miami Dolphins. Carolina is a 1.5-point home dog, which is surprising to me because the Dolphins don't really deserve to be favored over anybody. 44.5-point over-under. That is the 7th highest on the slate, so about average. Over catching a little bit of the steam. Carolina's offensive DVOA advantage is much better than Miami's offensive DVOA advantage, so they actually have a disadvantage because Carolina's been so great on defense this year. Stream Bryce Young, man. I really think that this line is totally bullshit. I think that the Panthers win this game. I think they should be 2.5-point favorites in this one, so I would even be cool teasing this one if you needed to. Bryce Young versus Miami's pass defense is free cash. They're literally number one as a defense in fantasy points per dropback to opposing offenses. Rico Dowdle is going to get the start for the Carolina Panthers. It was announced earlier today that Chuba Hubbard is probably going to miss the next couple of weeks with a calf injury that he came into Sunday's game dealing with. It sounds like he re-aggravated that injury. So if you have Rico Dowdle, he is absolutely a playable top 25-ish play at the running back position. And if he's on your waiver wire, go pick him up. Devon Achane versus the Carolina run defense. They've been very good against the run, but we know Achane is going to get peppered targets and have a high floor as a result. Teteroa McMillan has a nice matchup against Miami's secondary. They've been okay against fantasy wide receivers, but T-Mac should have a good performance in this one. Jalen Waddle now without Tyreek Hill, definitely going to be in your lineup, although Carolina has been pretty good against wide receivers. And I do think you could stream Darren Waller. I know he didn't have a lot of snaps last week, but he did score 2 touchdowns. His playing time should go up. And like I said, I like Carolina to win this game, so I like to stream their defense and their kicker if I need one. The stat of the game for this one, the Dolphins' defense is 32nd in success rate allowed to opposing offenses, and the Panthers are quietly 13th in success rate as an offense. Now, I'm confident that not only the Panthers will cover this 1.5, but they'll win this one outright. Home dogs against this defense and an offense now with Tyreek Hill on the mend. And I do think we could see the Teteroa McMillan breakout game, 100-plus yards and a touchdown. Hasn't scored yet on the season, so go trade for him before this game happens. And if you need a deeper name in this one, Malik Washington and Darren Waller are both beneficiaries of the Tyreek Hill injury. Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. The Colts are 7-point home favorites in this one, implied for 27.5 points, which is a top 5 mark on the entire week of all the teams. Over-under of 48 points, too, so expecting some fireworks potentially. Vegas is, and Indianapolis also has a top 5 DVOA advantage versus the Raiders secondary, who has not been good at this point in time. I think you can stream Geno Smith if you needed to, but honestly, I think there's 4 or 5 better options this week that I wouldn't resort to starting Geno Smith. I'll talk about streaming quarterbacks at the end of this video, but Geno Smith is not one of my 5 best streamers who is widely available. Daniel Jones is probably in your lineup given how he's played. Jonathan Taylor, of course, in your lineup because he's an every week starter. Same goes for Ashton Genty. Brock Bowers was downgraded to did not participate in Thursday's practice. We're still awaiting word on if he re-aggravated that knee injury. It sounds like he might have. So Brock Bowers, keep an eye on him because if he is going to be out, Michael Mayer could be an option as a streaming tight end this week because it is a very good matchup for the tight end position of the Raiders, but hopefully Brock Bowers is back. Jacoby Myers, of course, going to be in your lineup. Tyler Warren on the Colts side going to be in your lineup. Michael Pittman Jr. not practicing with a new hamstring injury as well. So if Pittman is out, I do think that Josh Downs is in play as a flex option, as a top 36 to top 45 wide receiver in this matchup. So keep an eye on Pittman, keep an eye on Bowers in this game. Stream Indianapolis's defense because it's a very good matchup for them, and Geno's been turning the ball over. And Spencer Schrader, the Schrader Brow, of course, you definitely want to be streaming him because he's been very good this year. Stat of the game for per fantasy points data, since his knee brace went on, Brock Bowers has averaged 9.4 fantasy points per game versus the 15.4 fantasy points per game that he had in his career prior to that. 0 games of double-digit fantasy points as opposed to 13 of 18 games with double-digit fantasy points. Brace Bowers is not as good as Brock Bowers, so we got to hope that Brock Bowers is okay. And if he's not, honestly, shut him down for a couple of games, let him get healthy, and let him get back on the field, because he's probably killing a lot of you guys, because you're not going to not play Brock Bowers if he's out there and ready to go. Some deeper names to play, like I made mention to, Josh Downs and also Trey Tucker, especially if Brock Bowers is out for this game, is a very, very decent option there. So moving into the New Orleans Saints taking on the New York Giants. The Saints are 2-point home favorites in this one, over under of 42 points. The under catching a lot of the steam, even though the pace and the DVOA matchups are pretty solid. I think you could stream Jackson Dart in this game. He had a pretty nice rushing performance last week. He looks like he can move the ball on this defense. And when you consider who he played last week, the Chargers defense versus now the Saints defense, this should be a much, much easier matchup for Jackson Dart and the Giants offense. Of course, now without Malik Neighbors, which sucks. But Cam Scatterbu is an excellent play this week. Wan'Dale Robinson, now with Malik Neighbors out, is probably the number one in terms of overall targets on that team. So he is a startable option. On the Saints side of things, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, of course, in your lineup. Both tight ends have bottom 12 matchups, and Juwan Johnson is really dealing with a lot of stuff right now. Plus, Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau's practice windows have been opened. They were coming off of PUP. So if you have Juwan Johnson, this whole renaissance that we've seen from him at the beginning of the year, it's possible it comes to an end very soon. So I would try and sell high on him if you possibly can. Try and tier up to a better tight end if you're able to, because he's dealing with some stuff. And of course, those other tight ends are coming back. So Juwan Johnson, definitely look to sell high on him. But if he plays, you can definitely put him out there. And then New Orleans defense and both kickers are absolutely in play, but probably just the Saints kicker given the point total that is implied. The stat of the game for this one is Cam Scatterbu right now among NFL running backs is 5th in missed tackles forced per attempt among, all the running backs with at least 20 carries. And the Saints have given up a league high 25 missed tackles to running backs, which makes Cam Scatterbu honestly a top 12 play for me at the running back position this week. So if you have Cam Scatterbu, it's probably going to be only one, maybe two more games of Tyrone Tracy being out. So keep that in mind. Maybe he's a sell high candidate after this game. People thinking he's going to be like a league winning running back, and he definitely could be still. But Tyrone Tracy coming back at some point would maybe muddy up his workload a little bit, and it could go back towards more of a 60-40 Scatterbu or even a 50-50 Scatterbu and Tracy there. So if Scatterbu has a monster game and everybody treats him like an RB1 in your league going forward, definitely potentially look to sell high on him in this game. Some deeper names, Theo Johnson at tight end and Darius Slayton at wide receiver. Without Malik Neighbors, somebody's going to have to catch the football in New York other than Wan'Dale Robinson. Moving into the Cowboys at the Jets here. Cowboys are 2.5-point road favorites. This game environment's one of the best on the entire slate. So if you need a flex play, a desperation option, probably try and get one from this game because it's an over-under of 47.5 points. The over is catching 11% of the steam. The pace of play is the fastest on the slate. And both offenses have top 5 DVOA advantages because that's how bad both defenses have been this year. Start Justin Fields, start Breece Hall, start Garrett Wilson, all of those top-end Jets players you are going to have in your lineup. And same goes for Dak Prescott, Javonte Williams, and George Pickens and Jake Ferguson. Those guys are going to be in your lineup as well. But if you want to get cute in this game, start a Mason Taylor, start a Jets receiver. I don't exactly even know who you would start. Probably Josh Reynolds, I guess. You probably could go ahead and do that because we are seeing that this game environment profiles really, really well for both opposing offenses. But regardless, you can start pretty much everybody outside of defenses in this game. And of course, both kickers are definitely startable as well. The stat of the game here, the Cowboys are allowing the most fantasy points per dropback to man coverage in the NFL at wide receiver. Now, they are running man coverage at one of the lowest rates in the NFL, but if we get some man coverage reps for Garrett Wilson, he is currently top 5 in the NFL in PFF receiving grade and yards per route run against man coverage. And even against zone coverage, the Cowboys are 3rd most fantasy points per dropback, and they run it like 85% of the time. So I think Garrett Wilson has a monster game in this one. Like I said, he has been good against both sets of coverages there. He's top 15 in yards per route run against both. Deep names to watch out for, like I said, Mason Taylor, Jalen Tolbert at wide receiver. Isaiah Davis with Braylon Allen slated to be out for the next 8 to 12 weeks, according to Aaron Glenn. That was the report today. Definitely a viable option if you really need a desperation running back. Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Denver Broncos. This is probably the best game in the 1 p.m. window, 43.5-point over-under. The over catching a lot of the steam here, so it looks like Vegas thinks that this game could be higher scoring than the implied total, or the sharps think that at least. Jalen Hurts is going to be in your lineup. Patrick Surtain expected to shadow A.J. Brown. Courtland Sutton expected to be shadowed by Quinyon Mitchell. So top receivers in this game might be taken out of it, or at least limited to some degree. So Devontae Smith, of course, going to be a better option, knowing that A.J. Brown's going to see that shadow coverage. Dallas Goedert's going to be a better option, knowing that A.J. Brown's going to see that shadow coverage. I do think we see a little bit more pass attempts from the Philadelphia Eagles. The higher or lower on Underdog, I believe, is set at 28.5 for Jalen Hurts' pass attempts, which would be one of the highest totals on the year so far for him. Bo Nix, definitely a viable streamer this week. And the defense of the Philadelphia Eagles and both kickers definitely in play. Per Scott Barrett, the stat of the game for this one is the Eagles are 19% play action offense, which is with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts should be way higher. They should be highest in the league or at least close to it. That is 4th lowest in the NFL. They're also 6th lowest in motion rate, 44% of their dropbacks. They have only 2 RPO dropbacks all season. Kevin Patullo has been a massive downgrade from Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore was much more creative than this, much less predictable. They've also, every time they're in shotgun, they run a passing play. Every time they're in a single back formation, they run a running play. Like 70, 85% of the time, it's super easy to diagnose for opposing defenses. So Philadelphia Eagles got to get a little bit more creative, man. I think that's what's causing a lot of this rift between A.J. Brown and the coaching staff and that kind of thing. If you need a deeper name, I think Troy Franklin's a great play with Sutton seeing shadow coverage. Tennessee Titans and Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are 7.5-point home favorites here. Over-under's pretty low at 42 points, under catching a lot of the steam. I think a lot of that is that the Titans can't score points. They literally scored 0 points against the Texans last week. I do think Arizona is set up very, very well. If you want to start Kyler Murray, I think you can. If you want to start either of the running backs, we don't exactly know. Without Trey Benson now for the next 4, maybe 6 weeks is the timeline I've heard from a lot of fantasy docs. We don't know if it's going to be DeMercado getting more than just the pass catching work and Carter being kind of like the early down back, or is this going to be a 3-way timeshare where Zonovan Bam Knight gets some of the early down work along with Michael Carter? I personally, if I had to pick one guy to start in this game, it would be DeMercado because I think he's just the most talented, the most efficient running back in this backfield. So even if you told me it's 12 opportunities across the board for all 3 of these backs, DeMercado to me would be my preference of that group. You are, of course, starting Marvin Harrison Jr. despite the shadow coverage matchup from L'Jarius Sneed. Trey McBride, an every week starter at tight end. And then on the Titans side of things, I do think Tony Pollard has a nice matchup here, and Tajay Spears' practice window has been opened up, and he's actually practicing right now, coming off of the high ankle sprain he suffered in the preseason. So if you get a big game out of Tony Pollard here, you got to sell high on this guy because Tajay is coming back very, very soon. And if people aren't paying attention in your league, they probably won't know that. So Tony Pollard, definitely a guy that I would sell high on if he has a nice game. And then Elikayo Manor, a great play this week because as of Friday morning when I'm recording this, Calvin Ridley didn't practice yesterday or on Wednesday with, I believe, an elbow injury. So if he is going to be out for this game, Elikayo Manor has a very, very good opportunity to carve out a nice target share. And if Calvin Ridley is out, some of the deeper name you could go to like Chigakonkwo at tight end, maybe one of the other Titans receivers like a Tyler Lockett. I probably wouldn't go there. I would just start Elikayo Manor and be on my merry way. But definitely a couple of great options in this game. The stat of the game for this one, the Cardinals offense is 5th highest in pass rate over expected. The Titans defense is 31st in pass rate over expected allowed, which is crazy because the Titans are not a good team. It's not like they're forcing teams to throw the ball because they're playing from ahead all the time. They've lost every game. So the fact that teams are choosing to pass the ball against them is really telling, knowing how bad of a team they've been. So lots of attempts coming for Kyler Murray, lots of attempts for McBride and Marvin Harrison. And like I said, I do think as a deeper name, you could even throw Michael Wilson out there if you were really desperate with injuries and bye week situations. Seattle Seahawks at home taking on my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Seahawks are 3.5-point favorites. Really tough travel for the Buccaneers going all the way to Seattle. This is, of course, the 50th anniversary game for both teams. Both teams' inception into the NFL in 1976. The best uniform matchup of all time because the Seahawks are going to be wearing their throwbacks. We're going to be wearing the creamsicles. Going to be absolutely just aesthetically jizz-worthy. Like this game is going to be awesome to watch as far as the uniforms are concerned. The play on the field, I think it could end up being a bit of a slugfest. The Seahawks defense has been playing very well. The Buccaneers defense, particularly the secondary, has taken a big step this year and played a lot better than they were playing in years past. And I do think both teams might struggle to score a lot of points in this one. I do think you can stream either of the quarterbacks. Sam Darnold is, of course, below Baker Mayfield just by status, but I think in a vacuum, he's probably the better play because the Bucs are dealing with some defensive injuries. And I do think Sam Darnold could have a good game in this one, but I do have Baker slightly ranked higher just because he's been better for fantasy this year. Kenneth Walker versus the Tampa Bay run defense, pretty daunting matchup on the ground. He's going to need some receiving touches to be able to take that over, but that's what the Buccaneers have been allowing you to do. You think of Barkley last week, Bijan in week 1. Every running back they've played has had like a season high in receiving touches when they've played Tampa Bay, and they've been picking on Servassier, Dennis, and the linebackers a lot. So I do think Kenneth Walker has a chance to catch a lot of passes in this game. Rashad White is going to start for Tampa Bay, and Sean Tucker going to be mixed in as well, because we do have no Bucky Irving in this game. It sounds like he's going to be out for the next 2, maybe 3 weeks potentially, and I do think Rashad White will get the majority of the workload. He's been able to handle it before. We saw in 2023 finishes an RB1 on that season, and while Sean Tucker will get some touches, I expect this to be largely a Rashad White workload. So if you have Rashad White, he's a top 15 running back in my rankings this week. He is absolutely a start this week for me. Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously a start for you. Emeka Egbuka, obviously a start for you. And Chris Godwin, 10 targets is 10 targets, man. I know he didn't look excellent in his first game back, but the Philadelphia secondary played super well in that game. And I think Chris Godwin can have a nice bounce back game against the Seahawks. Stream the Seattle defense as much as it hurts me to say it. It is a home game for them. They are playing very well. And of course, the Buccaneers had a lengthy travel to get to that game. And Jason Myers and Chase McLaughlin both in play at the kicker position. The stat of the game here: Sam Darnold is currently the quarterback 1 in the NFL in catchable pass rate, completion percentage over expectation, and highly accurate throw percentage per fantasy points data. So we're talking about a dude who is hitting everything he can possibly hit. So Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp, any pass catchers in this game, the 2 running backs, are in play for sure because of how well he's been able to complete passes, and that's kind of a weakness of the Buccaneers defense. We don't allow a lot of big plays right now, but we do allow completions. K. Dotton at tight end is a deep option that you can play, as is Sean Tucker at the running back position if you need one. Moving in to the Lions at the Bengals here. We have the Lions 10.5-point favorites. Detroit implied for 30 points. This is pretty straightforward. I mean, over under a 49.5. A majority of that is Detroit, and the over is catching a lot of the steam. So the Sharps are either expecting the Bengals to put up a better fight, or they're expecting the Lions to score 50 points, because the Lions could legit score 50 points in this game against a terrible Bengals defense. So that means every Lion needs to be in your lineup. I don't care who you have. David Montgomery's got to be out there. Jamison Williams has got to be out there. Of course, you were going to start ARSB and Goff and Gibbs, but I do think that all of the Lions, including Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams, and David Montgomery, have to be in your starting lineup, even if you have really solid options. I just don't want to miss out on this point implied total and this potential 45, 50-point game that Detroit puts up here. In the Bengals side of things, you are going to probably need to put Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins out there, I would imagine. Given the bye weeks and injuries, you probably don't have any other choices. But I will say I'm still willing to buy low on this offense getting better. I don't know how it's going to get better. I just think it will, because I think Jake Browning is better than what he showed so far. And I also think that Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown could be playing better as well. So if you want to buy low on some of these guys, go ahead and do it. Jamar Chase, I would say buy low for like mid wide receiver 2 price tags. T. Higgins for wide receiver 3-4 flex play price tags. And Chase Brown for like high end RB3 price tags. I think there's 80%, cents on the dollar that you're going to get on those players for what they could be. I'm not going to sit here and say Jamar is going to be a top 5 receiver rest of season, but he should still be a wide receiver 1 rest of season, and he's not producing like one at the moment. And I do think you can play Detroit's defense and kicker as well. Stat of the game: the Lions rank 4th in the NFL per Dataroma in fantasy points per drop back versus single high safety looks. The Bengals 2nd in the NFL in running single high safety looks. 63% of the time we are getting either a Jamison Williams or a Sam Laporta seam busting up the middle of the field bomb in this game, maybe multiple. So that's why I said J-Mo's got to be in your lineup, even though he's not really getting the targets right now. He is absolutely in play as a bomb touchdown type of play this week. Deeper name: if Noah Fant is out with this game for a concussion, you could probably play Mike Gesicki at tight end if you were desperate. I probably wouldn't mess with it, but it is a deeper name that you could throw out there if need be. Washington taking on the Chargers on the road in Los Angeles. The Chargers are 3-point favorites. 47.5 point is the over-under. The over catching 3% of the steam here. The pace of play 28.05, which is 4th highest on the slate. Now, Jane Daniels is back for the Commanders, but Terry McLaurin, and potentially not Deebo Samuel either, because he wasn't practicing as of yesterday. Jaden might be out there throwing to Zach Ertz, Luke McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane. So not a great Jaden Daniels setup here, but he probably will run the ball quite a bit, throw the ball to his running backs, that kind of thing. Maybe a sneaky start for Jeremy McNichols if you need an option because he is the pass-catching running back of the team and they might need to rely on him heavily. Justin Herbert's going to be in your lineup. Amarian Hampton's going to be in your lineup. All three wide receivers for the Chargers need to be in your lineup. I know Ladd McConkey's been bad lately, but he does have the best matchup on the field, which I'll get to in a second. And Zach Ertz, I think, is a great streamer and, in fact, is my number one streaming tight end this week because we are definitely without Terry McLaurin. He's already been ruled out, and probably not Deebo Samuel as well. We'll have to wait and see if Deebo plays. Of course, he's going to be an excellent play for you. But if he doesn't play, Zach Ertz is absolutely an awesome play. Both kickers are definitely in play for you, Matt Gay and Cameron Dicker. Stat of the game, per data Roma, the Commanders are dead last versus slot receivers, which is where Ladd McConkey plays. 9.63 yards per attempt, 84.3 yards per game, which is 29th in the NFL to slot receivers in the completion rate, 30th in the NFL at 77.1%. They saw Trey Tucker, who is a slot receiver for the Raiders, go very nuclear against them. So last chance to buy low on Ladd McConkey before this like wide receiver 3 price tag of his doesn't last. Not saying he'll become what we thought he was going to become coming into the season because it's clear that QJ is here to stay and Keenan Allen is here to stay. But wide receiver 2 every single week going forward is possible for Ladd McConkey after a big game here. And if you need a deeper name, Luke McCaffrey at wide receiver is definitely a great one to potentially pick up and start if you need somebody, and Deebo Samuel is out. So Patriots taking on the Bills on Sunday Night Football with Tirico and Collinsworth. Bills are 8.5-point favorites, over under a 49.5, which is the highest on the slate. The over catching a lot of the steam, and both DVOA matchups for each offense against the opposing defense is great. Drake May has been playing out of his mind, man, and it's crazy that he's not even bringing a whole lot of guys along for the ride. I mean, Hunter Henry's been great so far. Stephon Diggs got on track last week, but Drake May he's just playing so well. So you can play him. The Bills defense is not a very daunting matchup. Josh Allen, of course, is going to be in your lineup. James Cook, of course, is going to be in your lineup. Trevion Henderson, who saw a little bit of a workload increase, is going to be in your lineup as a flex option. Start Khalil Shakir. If you want to flex Keon Coleman, you definitely could, given the game environment. Stephon Diggs revenge game. Patriots going to Buffalo, where Stephon Diggs made his hay for a number of years. Buffalo cornerbacks are going to know him probably pretty well, but I do actually really like Stephon Diggs this week, knowing that he got back on track from a routes perspective, 100 yards receiving last week. I'll get to him more in a second. Dalton Kincaid, 27th easiest matchup. He is in your lineup. He's honestly just a touchdown or bust tight end. He's not getting the routes necessarily or the targets, but he is the type of guy that is relied upon in the red zone, and he's in an offense that's implied for like 30 points every week. So you got to be putting him out there, and he's currently a top 6 tight end in fantasy, and Hunter Henry is the opposite. He's getting the targets, so you have to put him out there as well. The stat of the game, in his last 3 games against former teams, Stephon Diggs, Vikings twice with Houston, and Buffalo last year with Houston. Stephon Diggs averages 12 targets and 101 receiving yards per game against his former team. So the routes jumped up. Like I said, he had 100 yards on the week last week, and he's finally the number 1 receiver on this team. I think a Stephon Diggs revenge game narrative feels pretty good for me, so I am throwing him out there if I got him. Deeper name to consider, Kayshon Boutte at wide receiver as well. Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars on Monday Night Football. Kansas City Chiefs implied for 25 points. They're 3.5-point road favorites in this one. 46.5-point over-under, and over catching a lot of the steam here. It looks like the Sharps like this one to potentially be a shootout. Patrick Mahomes is going to be in your lineup. Travis Etienne is going to be in your lineup. Pacheco and Hunt, I think, are flexible options. You don't really feel great about any of them, and they're talking about getting Rashard Smith more involved, so that's not excellent, but you can throw them out there given the bye weeks and the injuries that we've suffered this week. Xavier Worthy is going to be in your lineup, absolutely. You could probably flex Marquise Brown or Tyquan Thornton or any of those other guys if you wanted to, but Worthy is definitely the starter of this group. BTJ is definitely the starter of the Jaguars group, but Travis Hunter, quietly one of the best matchups on the field against the Kansas City slot corner. He is one of the worst in the league. I believe he is currently allowing the most fantasy points per dropback and the 3rd highest targets per route run among all cornerbacks in the league. So I do think Travis Hunter could have a nice breakout game here. Travis Kelce and Brenton Strange are streamable tight ends for you because of the game environment and the potential scoring. And both kickers definitely in play as well, even though both teams, for whatever reason, just don't allow a lot of field goals. Stat of the game is that Patrick Mahomes leads all quarterbacks on throws of 10-plus air yards from a clean pocket. 54% leads all of those quarterbacks, and with Xavier Worthy coming back, this game could be a high-scoring one, and we could see one of those bomb touchdowns go out to Xavier Worthy. If you need a deeper name in this one, Kareem Hunt is definitely an option. Rashard Smith may be an option if you're really, really looking deep for it, and De'Ami Brown on the Jaguars side, if he's back from injury, he is a deeper option that you could start as well. Streamers, Quarterbacks, tight ends, defenses, kickers. Let's get into it. Streaming quarterbacks that are under 70% rostered, so guys that are widely available for you. My number one streamer was Matthew Stafford, and he had a good game on Thursday night, so that gets one of those out of the way. Jackson Dart versus the Saints. He's running a little bit. Feel good about the matchup. Sam Darnold versus the Buccaneers. Like I said, good matchup at home, and some defensive injuries for Tampa Bay. He's widely available. You should be able to go get him. CJ Stroud versus the Ravens. Again, no Lamar on the other side of that game. I think they'll possess the football a lot. Great matchup for Nico Collins. Bryce Young, if you need to dig really deep here, like I said, Miami is number one in fantasy points per drop back to opposing offenses. Streaming tight ends. Zach Ertz, the absolute cream of the crop. Without Deebo Samuel, probably, and definitely without Terry McLaurin, he is an absolute must start at the tight end position for streamers. Brenton Strange, a good streaming option given the matchup and the scoring totals. Harold Fannin, a really good option against the Minnesota Vikings as well, because like I said, without Cedric Tillman, they'll probably need to use more of the tight ends. Darren Waller, assuming the routes correct themselves, I do think is a great option against Carolina. And Mason Taylor, if you have to dig deep, that's a great game environment, so Mason Taylor is a pretty good option. Top 5 defenses: Minnesota at Cleveland, Arizona versus Tennessee, Detroit at Cincinnati, Indianapolis versus Las Vegas, Cleveland versus Minnesota. Los Angeles Rams already played against San Francisco. That one didn't really work out as well because Mac Jones decided to go blicky on him. Philadelphia versus Denver, Buffalo versus New England, Seattle versus Tampa Bay, Dallas versus New York Jets, and then top 5 kickers: Brandon Aubrey, Schrader, Dicker, Prater, and Butker, my top 5. And then my top 6 through 10 is Kaimi Fairbairn, Chase McLaughlin, Jake Elliott, Jake Bates, and Joshua Carty, who already played. So those are matchups that matter. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. I'll try and answer as many start-sit questions as I can. Of course, you can head on over to flockfantasy.com, get our weekly start-sit rankings, our weekly matchup charts to set your own fantasy lineups, and you can also ask us questions over there, so check that out if you're interested. But with that being said, like, comment, subscribe if you're new around here. Again, only about 45% of you guys watching these videos are subscribed to the channel. Let's change that. Let's get this video up to, 500 likes. Can we get this to 500 likes? Appreciate all of you guys hitting the like button if you enjoyed. And especially if I answer your question down below in the comments, definitely hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed as well. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.